Crying Gladys Wanga stops countrywide meetings after Edwin Sifuna did this. Welcome to Kenya Lens Media, where we bring you news updates as they break, and kindly, if you are new here, consider subscribing. Now, a fresh political storm is gathering inside ODM, and now Vihiga Senator Godfrey Ososi says that Linda Mwananchi movement already controls 30 counties across the country. A reason why Gladys Wanga had to put to a halt their countrywide meetings with the ODM supporters. The battle for influence within Orange Democratic Movement is intensifying after Vihiga Senator Godfrey Ososi declared that the Linda Mwananchi faction has gained control in 30 out of Kenya's 47 counties. Speaking during a radio interview on Wednesday, Ososi claimed that the movement's growing support forced their rivals in the Linda ground faction to suspend nationwide delegate meeting, and his remarks now deepen an already widening political contest within ODM as rival camps scramble for relevance, numbers, and also influence ahead of the 2027 general election. What began as an internal political disagreement inside ODM is now evolving into a major national political realignment, and at the center of that growing contest is the Linda Mwananchi movement, a faction associated with Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna and backed by several leaders who argue that ordinary party supporters have been sidelined in key decisions. And according to Senator Godfrey Ososi, the movement's rise was born out of frustration, and the outspoken senator says members of the faction felt pushed aside by their former political allies in the rival Linda ground camp. He argues that this exclusion created space for a new political force that is now spreading rapidly across the country. Ososi says the movement has gone beyond ODM strongholds and is attracting support from leaders and supporters both inside and outside the party. His comments come at a time when political temperatures inside ODM continue to rise. For months, the party has witnessed competing rallies, parallel meetings, and also sharp exchanges between leaders aligned to different camps. And while Oburu Odinga-led Linda ground faction initially held meetings with the delegates across various counties, Ososi now claims those engagements slowed down after the rival group realized the growing strength of Linda Mwananchi on the ground. And according to him, the numbers were changing, the crowds were growing, and the political move and the mood inside ODM was shifting. Ososi also accused the Linda ground faction of consistently changing strategy in an attempt to remain politically relevant. He claimed the faction abandoned one approach after another, moving from delegate meetings to youth conventions across the country. The remarks reflect the increasingly public rivalry between the two camps as both sides compete to define the future direction of the party. But beyond the political exchanges, new polling data is now adding even more pressure to the debate. Just days before Ososi's latest remarks, a TIFA poll showed the Linda Mwananchi movement enjoying 73% nationwide support, and that figure placed the faction far ahead of Linda ground, which stood at 23% support across the country. The poll has since triggered intense reactions within ODM, especially among leaders from the western region. Some leaders now fear the growing popularity of the Sifuna-led team would reshape political calculations not only inside ODM but also within Kenya's broader opposition politics. And among those who have weighed in the cabinet secretary for cooperatives and also SMEs, Wycliffe Oparanya. Oparanya recently expressed a concern that the removal of Edwin Sifuna from ODM leadership had complicated political mobilization efforts for President William Ruto, and his remarks highlighted the growing political value of Sifuna and the influence his allies appear to command among supporters. At the same time, Lurambi Member of Parliament Titus Hamala has also entered the debate with a warning directed at ODM leadership. Kamala argued that if ODM fails to manage the internal divisions carefully, President William Ruto could eventually prefer coalition talks with the Edwin Sifuna-led faction rather than Oburu Odinga-aligned camp. according to Hamala, politics is ultimately driven by numbers. And in a political season already focused on the next election cycle, alliances are increasingly being measured through influence, crowd strength, and also voter appeal. Inside ODM itself, party chairperson Gladys Wanga is now attempting to steady the situation. Wanga has urged members of the Linda Ground faction to abandon the splinter identity and fully embrace the ODM party name going forward. She argues that leaders who already hold official party instruments cannot continue presenting themselves as a separate internal group. Her message appears aimed at restoring party unity at a time when ODM is facing one of the most visible internal political contests in recent years. And still, questions continue to grow around the Linda Mwananchi movement itself, and despite attracting large crowds and also raising support, many Kenyans are now asking what exactly the movement intends to become. Is it simply pressuring group within ODM? Is preparing to negotiate political power internally? Or is it slowly positioning itself as a larger national political force ahead of 2027? So far, the movement's leaders have not publicly named a presidential candidate or clearly outlined their final political strategy, and that uncertainty is now becoming one of the biggest talking points surrounding the movement. Political observers note that while momentum and public excitement can strengthen a faction, a long-term political influence often depends on structure, leadership clarity, and a defined national agenda. And with the 2027 general election drawing closer, pressure is building for the faction to explain its next move. And in response to the growing questions, leaders linked to Linda Mwananchi now say a major decision could soon be announced. The faction has revealed plans to hold a political retreat in 3 weeks shortly after a planned grand rally in Migori County. And according to the group, the retreat will help provide direction on the movement's future course and political strategy. That announcement is now being closely watched across the country, and because what happens next inside ODM could significantly influence the shape of opposition politics in Kenya. For many supporters on the ground, the battle is no longer just about party positions. It is becoming a struggle of identity, representation, and political control. And for ordinary Wananchi, following the developments, the growing divisions raise difficult questions about unity inside one of Kenya's biggest political parties. As rival camps continue to mobilize support, the stakes are steadily rising. The outcome could determine who controls ODM's political direction and who shapes future coalitions, and who eventually carries the opposition banner into the next general election. For now, one thing is becoming increasingly clear, that the internal contest inside ODM is no longer a quiet disagreement behind closed doors. It is now a public political battle unfolding county by county, rally by rally, and leader by leader. And with each new testament and statement, each new crowd, and each new alliance, the political map ahead of 2027 continues to shift. In politics, numbers can build power, but unity often determines survival. And as Kenya moves closer to 2027, the struggle inside ODM may shape far more than just one party's future. And that is all for today from Kenyan Media, where we bring you news updates as they break. And kindly, if you are new here, consider subscribing.